The secret plan to invade the United States may have just been leaked. What's surprising is that the plan is one that's actually coming from the United Nations. Now, it's also directly connected to one of the biggest issues that the United States of America is facing right now. It's a concern that many Americans share, and it's one that involves the supposed plan of pushing more people into our country. Now, this problem is apparent if you take one look at the US-Mexico border. Within the past few years, we've seen millions of illegal aliens just march right onto our borders with the intent of living here. And the situation is just so bad that some of them have even forced their way into our country. Acts that have literally physically injured some of our National Guardsmen and women. And despite this, the Biden administration just continues to turn a blind eye to this problem. Now, if you're hesitant to believe that this entire border issue isn't spurred by the United Nations, check out this infomercial that they released almost a decade ago where they predict what's going to happen. And believe me guys, you're going to want to listen very closely to every word.
In some countries, the total population will grow, while in others, it will decline. One thing that all countries have in common is the need to plan for population aging. People aged 60 and older are now the world's fastest growing age group. Ensuring their economic security in later life, meeting their healthcare needs, and protecting their rights must remain a top priority. Cities will absorb all of the world's population growth over the next 15 years. This puts them on the front line when it comes to eliminating poverty, reducing pollution, and ensuring access to safe water and essential services. Currently, there are more than 230 million international migrants in the world. Over the next 15 years, this number could increase by another 30 million people. International migration can be a transformative force for both migrants and their communities. In order to harness the full potential of migration for development, however, we must create sufficient legal channels for safe and orderly migration. Our greatest challenge for the future is to ensure that the world's population can thrive. We must eliminate both poverty and unsustainable patterns of production and consumption. Through a deeper understanding of how the world is changing, combined with better planning, stronger partnerships, and greater political will, we can create a better tomorrow for both people and planet.
Now, we may be under the interpretation that this is being done to sway the election from one side to the other. And while this has some merit, it may not actually be the goal. And sure, it could be probably one of the perks, and election fraud can probably be obtained through illegal immigrants. However, you did hear what the United Nations has said. They outright talked about population changes with some countries declining and others increasing their numbers. Now for us, I think it's pretty obvious that illegal immigration has boosted the number of people living in the United States. But the reality is that it's not just happening to us. It's a crisis that's also affecting different countries across Europe. Take a look at this survey. And before I show you this, all I ask is that you take 1 second, hit the like button for the video. I totally appreciate you guys. And I want to thank you so much for always sharing these videos and subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much, guys. Totally helps out the channel a lot. All right, so it shows that 7 out of 10 Europeans believe that their country is accepting too many illegal immigrants. Greece is showing a whopping 90% of its citizens saying that they believe this fact, while there's not a single country on here that has less than 70% of their citizens saying the exact same thing. It's a sentiment that's shared with a lot of citizens here at home too, especially when you realize that a majority of American voters are now much more worried about the state of immigration in our country. Adding to it is the financial strain that the states and cities are going through as they provide necessities for all these different people. They could come in the form of food, clothing, housing, with some of them getting debit cards with thousands of dollars on them from the get-go. But let's go ahead and get back to what the United Nations is doing, all right? So the Population Division of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs conducts demographic research, supports intergovernmental processes at the United Nations in the area of population and development. Now, this is right off of their website, guys. The goal of this division is to help countries produce and analyze population data. The advertised endgame deals with the problem of population aging, as was said just a moment ago. Now, there is someone else who's tied to the scheme. He goes by the name of George Soros. Soros laid out a plan around a decade ago that centered around immigration. He said that this plan was for Europe to avoid a catastrophe. This was a comprehensive plan that he said could alleviate Europe's refugee crisis, something that the Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban, opposed. He quoted Soros' piece and said that the billionaire put forth a plan that would have the EU accept 1 million asylum seekers annually. Now, this is a huge ask, 1 million asylum seekers? And Orban says that Soros is buying off members of parliament to get them in line. He was said to have been doing this with different countries to get these people to agree with his policies. Now, what's really odd is that there's a trend that many are now seeing with these supposed asylum seekers. Much like what we've seen, most of them are predominantly middle-aged men. Now, this has led some critics to believe that these aren't just asylum seekers, but instead they're soldiers of the United Nations.
What you're seeing right behind me, this is military-age single adult males, mostly single adult males. We just had about 8 Syrian nationals come across. There's people from all over, the world showing up here, right here in Lukeville. And just like you mentioned in the beginning of this segment, resources are so stretched so thin that they've had to shut down ports of entry. Border Patrols had to reassign operations to come down here and address this. And look, this is just reminiscent of what I dealt with the last 2 years in Yuma. So again, we are continuing this the same uncontrolled, unregulated, illegal immigration, and something needs to happen. Washington needs to get this right. It's getting old real fast.
Yeah, it is. I was looking at a map, and if you take a road to get to Tucson from where you are right now, I think you got to drive 150 miles.
Which begs the question, are they a part of the plan to take over different countries and governments around the world? Is that the end game? And to make matters even worse, it comes out that the UN is also providing these individuals with debit cards. They're doing it for illegal immigrants that are entering our country as well. This was revealed some time ago as the United Nations Refugee Agency was criticized for handing out these debit cards to US-bound migrants. These cards are replenished monthly. However, a story came out that someone was complaining to the UN about not getting his monthly budget. This was reported by Todd Bensman from the Center of Immigration Studies. This also led to the discovery of these cards. Now, according to them, families can receive hundreds of dollars a month for unrestricted, unconditional use in local country areas. Some families were reported to even getting around $400 every 2 weeks. Note that the UN also gets some of its funding from American taxpayers. But of course, this is an election year, and we know that the Biden administration is fully aware of how this is affecting the polls, which is why we're now seeing write-ups talk about how Mexico is now stopping nearly 3 times as many migrants who have crossed our borders compared to last year. Although that's not really a big number given that millions have already crossed within the past few years. Many expect that if elected, President Joe Biden will continue to welcome these quote-unquote newcomers into the country, even with the supposed strict measures that Mexico is now upholding. But what do you guys think? Is this all part of the plan from George Soros? And is the UN, together with many high-ranking officials in different governments, in on this too? Now, as far as I know, I'll continue to get all the information and provide you guys with the updates on this. This is a crisis that is now affecting millions of Americans across the nation. Anyway, before I go, I just want to thank y'all for hitting the like button for the video. Thanks so much for subscribing, and I'll see you all in the next one.